My name is Kate Willis. I'm a nurse practitioner specializing in functional medicine and women's health.
I'm Dr. Polly Watson, and Kate and I together make up Hormone Wellness MD. We've put together this opportunity for women to get access to continuous glucose monitors because we want to share with you some lessons we've learned that can be really transformative to help people get back on track with their health. Insulin resistance is something that many women are struggling with, whether they be in the reproductive era with polycystic ovarian syndrome. High toxic loads can make people insulin resistant. Perimenopause and menopause transition is when we see a lot of insulin resistance. But you may not be super clear on what we're talking about when we're talking about insulin resistance. So what does that really mean? So if you think about glucose is sort of hooking up with insulin, almost like a lock and key mechanism to get energy into the cell so that the cell can use the energy for fuel. In an insulin resistant paradigm, insulin can't hook up with the cell, so glucose can't get in the cell. So that person's blood glucose is going to be a lot higher. The person is also going to feel fatigued, foggy, and hungry because their cells never got the energy and the food that they needed. And then the last example is someone that's just eating too much sugar, eating too many carbohydrates. It's not that the system isn't working, it's just the system is overloaded. It can't process all the glucose that it has.
We see a lot of women coming into our practice with concerns about sex hormones, with concerns with fatigue and energy levels, brain fog. Sometimes when we start to sort this out, we can't always tell without any extra data what's going on. Is it solely the sex hormones, or are we dealing with cortisol, or are we dealing with blood sugar imbalances? This picture represents someone who's in a lot of chaos with their blood sugar. They're in the middle of a storm. Their blood sugar levels are going up very high, very often, and dipping down maybe too low for this person. But this is going to cause a lot of symptoms that can impact not only the blood sugar, but also impact sex hormones and has a relationship with cortisol as well. This next slide represents a more peaceful blood glucose level. If you look at that range, this person is not going up very high or very low most of the time. They're staying within a fairly tight range, which just leads to feeling more balanced in general, perhaps more energy, perhaps more mental clarity, and it can also help support balancing sex hormones as well. Sometimes the carb load is actually just too high, and so we need to work on shifting how we eat carbohydrates. So one of the things that we recommend is consuming fiber first. This is great done when it's a food, and so that can come from vegetables. It can come from something like flax seeds or chia seeds. We can also strategically at times bring in supplemental fiber for people who are really struggling with their blood glucose regulation. Protein and fat are very important for keeping blood sugar steady. And so that's why you may have heard the recommendation to always include a protein and a fat source when you eat a carbohydrate. It's best not to eat carbs in isolation. One of the hacks that you can use is actually consuming carbohydrates last. And so thinking about a plate that you might have for dinner, you may eat your vegetables first and then your protein, which often can be a fat source as well, and then consume maybe a sweet potato or quinoa last. Another hack that we can pull out is movement. So other than insulin, exercise is really the only other thing that moves glucose into our cells so that our cells have energy. So when we go for a walk, our muscles get hungry, and that exercise helps shuttle blood glucose into our cells so that they can be utilized. This can help keep our blood sugar levels from going up so much if we eat a carb-heavy meal, if we eat our carbs first, or if we're struggling a lot with blood glucose control. Another hack that some people find helpful is having apple cider vinegar with carbohydrates. this can help blunt the effect of the carbohydrate on our blood glucose levels.
So a lot of patients have been following Instagram and they've been trying to do some of these hacks, and they may not quite understand how the hacks work in their body. So it's really helpful to actually get some personalized data about what's happening in your body. So this is my CGM. I'm generally pretty flat. I made myself some gluten-free pita bread, and I added in to the kind of white gluten-free flour, I added in some buckwheat flour. So I knew I wanted to add some more fiber to that. And I had my chicken and vegetables with it, and I dipped it in olive oil. And then I went on a walk. So initially I thought, okay, I'm doing okay with this carbohydrate load. And I went on the walk. And then I came home and I sat down and I worked on charts. So I was sitting pretty long, and I had this second really spike. I call this kind of a bunny ear pattern. And so what was really helpful, that even I used all of my hacks, I needed more support for that glucose load not to have that secondary spike. So the next time I might have gone on a longer walk, I may have restricted the portion of the pita bread that I had. I might have, like Kate mentioned, had an additional fiber supplement 30 minutes before I ate that meal. So I can really see in real time how these hacks are working for me, and also how much of the glucose load can I hack away. So for my level of insulin resistance at almost 50, I might still need to do some restriction or some modifications so that my glucose level doesn't have that secondary spike. Another thing we just wanted to illustrate for you is just how powerfully coupling carbohydrates with fat, fiber, protein is, and just it's so unbelievable how many women we see that start off the morning with basically carbohydrates. They're starting with a bagel, they're starting with some oatmeal, they're starting with some cereal, and they're like, I'm so tired and my brain doesn't work. And we're like, yeah, because your blood sugar just went up and then it just went right back down, and you're gonna feel foggy and maybe even a little bit fatigued. So this is a nice example where this person is having protein in the form of eggs, some vegetables, it's all cooked up in some healthy fat, maybe some grass-fed butter, and she really doesn't have much of a spike, and she feels pretty full for the morning. And then on the days she has oatmeal with skim milk and berries, she's basically having mostly carbs. There's a little bit of protein in the milk, but there's also a fair amount of lactose or milk sugar. She goes up to 180, which is pretty impressive. And so she felt pretty hungry as her blood sugar was coming down. Her mood might get a little dysregulated. Her energy levels are certainly going to get dysregulated. So it's also really helpful to see. Sometimes the glucose monitor can keep you a little bit accountable and help you see in real time what's going on with your body. Another thing that we just wanted to point out is glucose monitors aren't perfect. So they will often give low values when they're being compressed. And Kate's going to show you exactly where to put this monitor on. So if the monitor's on the side of your arm and you're laying on the side of your arm to sleep, it can compress the monitor and give you a lot of low values, which are probably not accurate, right? If someone has a glucose of 53 and that's really a true value, typically they're going to feel sweaty, rapid heart rate, really weak. They might feel really anxious. So if your values are reading really low, you want to make sure that you're not compressing it. And you may actually want to do a finger stick glucose check to just see if this reading is correct.
This picture tells us a little bit about proper placement of the glucose monitor. So as Dr. Watson mentioned, if you're putting it on a place, think where you would lie if you were lying on your side in bed. That is not the proper placement for the blood glucose monitor. You want it on the back of the arm. If you lift your arm up, it's kind of that, for most of us, kind of a softer part of the arm. We can usually pinch some skin or some fat. That's the proper placement for the blood glucose monitor. Again, we've alluded to this, but you should be able to sleep on your side without compression. So if you're trying to navigate where to put it, lie down on your side as if you were in bed, and the portion of your arm that's touching the bed is not the place to put that. Again, you want to find the area that's not in contact, at least with a lot of pressure to the bed. Sleep apnea is really an interesting thing to think about when we're looking at blood glucose levels. So with both of these, we're seeing, if you look at the times during the daytime, we're seeing pretty good glucose control here. So this was taken from a person who is really doing all the things. They're eating well, they're exercising, they are watching their carbohydrate intake, and they were frustrated that they weren't making as much progress. This was really helpful in determining where one of the issues was, and it's with the uncontrolled sleep apnea. So this person had sleep apnea, but wasn't wearing a CPAP at night. And so if you can look on that first, the one on the top, that spike at 10 p.m., that's the highest spike this person had during the entire day. And it wasn't because of food, it was related to the sleep apnea.
So that's a great segue, kind of thinking about sometimes it's not what we're eating, but it's stress or cortisol. So sleep apnea is going to be, people aren't getting enough oxygen at night. That's stressful for the body. The body's going to generate some more stress hormone or cortisol. Cortisol impairs insulin sensitivity, so glucose can't get in the cells, the blood sugar goes up, right? So this is again my CGM. I'm generally pretty steady. Generally, I'm going to eat like a kale salad with some salmon and some tomatoes. Maybe I'll have part of a sweet potato. Maybe I'll have a little bit of quinoa on it. On kind of a regular sort of day, I'm pretty steady. This is me giving a lecture at lunch with having some technology issues during that time. So my cortisol was higher going into that meal. I was trying to eat and give the lecture, and my cortisol was up. So even though my food wasn't terrible, I had salmon and half a sweet potato and a kale salad, I had more of a spike than I would normally have had just because I was under a little bit more stress. So it's really important when you're trying to learn more about this, if you can let us know food, mood, and movement. And Kate's going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute.
So when we look at food, mood, movement in the context of our blood sugar, we can use that to make some conclusions about how to improve our health. So if you see here, this strip shows a big spike in the middle of the morning around 11 a.m., but we don't know why that spike happened. So there's no information here that's recorded about food intake, about stress, about sleep, about movement. And so while we see that there's a big spike here, we don't know how to counsel this person to avoid having a spike like that in the future. So really, I tell people anything that feels significant. If you think your cortisol went up, if you felt stressed out, if you slept really badly the night before, I really like to know that, because we can see that that may impact your blood glucose levels. If you're waking up in the middle of the night, that might be another thing to record. Certainly food is important to record because food has such a powerful influence on our blood sugar levels. It also helps to know, as we saw on an earlier slide with Dr. Watson, how movement impacts your blood sugar levels. If you had a higher carb meal, if you were able to go for a walk, did that lower it? Was the walk long enough? Was there enough exercise to counteract that load of carbohydrates? Mood, certainly if you've had a fight with someone, or if you were almost in a car accident and felt a lot of fear, those may be helpful things to record as well. Again, we don't want to overwhelm you, but information helps us make just really more educated recommendations about how to have better glucose control.
Kate made some really great points about we want to be so helpful and give you as much insight into this experience as we possibly can. And we can't do that if we're just getting crazy glucose all over the place and we don't have any context about, oh, that could have been stress, or oh, that was a trip to Krispy Kreme, or that was, I did a really hard HIIT workout fasting. So if you work out really hard in a fasted state, particularly for upwards of an hour, you might start to mobilize glycogen from your liver and your blood sugar goes up. with no food on board. So exercises really can make it go up or down depending. Where would you write these things? So we use the Freestyle Libra. The Libra Link app is where you would record it. And at the bottom here, there's a place to say add a note. The cool thing about this is when you click on it, it timestamps your note on your glucose chart. And I would really just freestyle. I wouldn't click on the thing that says how many grams of carbs or how many grams of insulin. I would just click on the note here and freestyle and just say fear, HIIT workout, 45 minutes, Krispy Kreme donut, kale salad with sweet potato, whatever it needs to be. But that's where you record so that we can partner with you to help give you the best outcome you can from doing this experience.